everyone. Welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. North Korea and Russia's ties are seemingly getting more and more stronger, with Pyongyang providing Moscow with weapons in exchange for necessities the regime is in dire need of. Experts say such cooperation between the two rogue states is very concerning, adding it could have a very serious effect on Korean Peninsula geopolitics. This comes amid the regime's active removal of unification references, raising the achievements of Kim Jong-un's predecessors Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. To get to know more about how tensions on the peninsula are developing, we invited Dr. Ko Myong-hyun, a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Dr. Ko, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Bruce Klingner, a senior research fellow from the Heritage Foundation. Good to have you with us, Mr. Klingner.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Dr. Go. So North Korean leader Kim Jong-un recently started to erase unification references, even dismantling a monument honoring the reunification efforts of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. What could be the reasons behind such a move?
Well, clearly North Korea is mounting a major political offensive coinciding with the election year, very important election year for South Korea and the United States. And what North Korea is trying to do is really put some action or credibility behind the words that they're putting out in their very aggressive statements, threatening with nuclear attacks against the South, as well as implying attacks against the United States and Japan. And then one reason I think North Korea is doing this, taking action such as dismantling monuments that celebrate unification or aspiration to unification between the two Koreas, is that it's to send a message to South Korea that it doesn't consider South Korea as a country of special relations with the North, based on the fact that the two Koreas share the same language, culture, and basically are part of the same nation. And then the implication here is that North Koreans are going to treat South Korea as an alien enemy. And that really increases the likelihood of North Korea not really holding themselves back when it comes to, if the need arises, to use nuclear weapons. So there are a lot of speculation in South Korea that North Korea would never use nuclear weapons against the South, because it would go against their own concept of unification, as well as the idea of a same nation. So, but then what North Koreans are doing right now is essentially going after this very concept that South Korea somehow is an exception to also target us of North Korea's nuclear weapons. So there's that point. The second point is that indirectly Kim Jong-un is showing to their own people, but also as to the rest of the world, that Kim Jong-un is his own man. It's been more than 10 years since he became the leader of North Korea. And if there's one single person, the only person who can really go after the sacred cows of monuments, for instance, celebrating his father and grandfather, would be Kim Jong-un himself. So he's demonstrating that he's his own man, he's no longer under the shadow of his father or his grandfather. So it's also interesting that the North Koreans are really kicking into high gear the cult of personality around Kim Jong-un since at least 2 years ago. And I think this is another aspect of Kim Jong-un becoming more confident about his hold on power and his own stature in the history of North Korea.
All right, I see. Well, regarding this, Mr. Klingner, Unification Minister Kim Yong-ho pointed out that such erasing of achievements made by predecessors could create confusion among the North Korean elite. How do you see such a view?
Because it's such a startling policy change and a significant policy change, I think it certainly would cause a lot of confusion, not only by the North Korean elites, but by the public. Kim Jong-un is going against, even rejecting the policies of his father and grandfather, which really is sacrilegious in North Korean society. Anyone else even criticizing the leader's policies, I'm sure, would have dire consequences. So, it's almost as if the Catholic Pope had taken out parts of the Bible and rejected them. So I would think the elites and the public would be very unsure of really embracing the new policy, just because they would be afraid of being punished for going against the wishes of the previous leaders. But clearly Kim Jong-un is in power now. But it really shows a major shift a rejection of the previous policies of trying to embrace unification or reunification with South Korea. But there's a lot of debate amongst Korea watchers as to what this will mean, whether all diplomatic engagement between the Koreas will be forever prevented, or if it'll be done on a different footing. So, but I think we're all in agreement that this year is going to be quite contentious, quite a bumpy ride, and that the increased tensions are likely.
All right, I see. So it is indeed a surprising policy change, and it will definitely create confusion to not only elites, but also the public. I see. Now, Dr. Go, let's move on to Russia-North Korea ties. It appears to be becoming even stronger than ever, with Putin gifting Kim Jong-un with a luxury car and hundreds of Russian tourists visiting Pyongyang. But first of all, how is Russia viewing North Korea at this moment?
Well, clearly Russia is paying a lip service to the idea that the two countries are very close and they are partners and they are even comrades against this historical struggle against the collective West. But having said that, I think Russians are sending gestures, I would say, to North Korea to somehow, what North Koreans want from Russia is probably more than just gestures, such as getting free car from Putin or getting food supplies. I think what North Korea wants from Russia, in addition to the sensitive military technology, as well as the sophisticated components that they can put into use in their, for instance, ballistic missiles, would be recognition of North Korea's nuclear state by Russia. And that's not forthcoming at the time. Also, North Koreans are probably want Putin to pay a reciprocal visit to North Korea, because that will be taken as a sign that Russia and North Korea are countries of equal stature. So these are all major actions that North Koreans expect from Russia. But then that's not forthcoming anytime soon. Russians are leaving this ambiguous. And clearly it depends on, it's really up to Putin what to do in the coming months in order to upgrade the level of a partnership that they already have. Until then, it'll be just gestures and mere words. But then on the other hand, it doesn't mean that the Russian-North Korea relation is not getting a threatening dimension. It's actually becoming very serious. We know that North Korea supplied Russia with 6,700 containers filled with probably with ammunitions, and then some people estimate that this probably amounts to 3 million artillery shells of 52 millimeter caliber, and then the Russians decorated by sending up to 9,000 containers containing we don't know what. But then much more. But then I think, given the fact, you can tell from the fact that we know precise number of containers that are being exchanged, that the international community are tracking the Russian and the North Korean movements very closely. And I think the Russians are using this in a way to send a signal to United States and South Korea, because one of the most concerning visits involved this cargo ship, Russian cargo ship that first went to a submarine base near Vladivostok in the Russian Far East, then went to North Korea unloading some very nefarious containers. So I think Russians are showing that there are a high level of military technology exchange between the two countries, and probably this is the source of the biggest concern for South Korea at the moment.
All right, I see. Well, staying on North Korea-Russia ties, Mr. Klingner, Kim Jong-un recently has been engaging in activities related to people's livelihoods. And some experts say this is all because he was able to secure funds through boosted ties with Russia. How do you see this?
I think certainly North Korea is getting economic benefits from Russia in return for sending large amounts of munitions. We don't know really still the details of the North Korean-Russian exchange, particularly what Moscow is providing to Pyongyang. But I think, even separate, though, from any kind of economic benefits North Korea may have received, we've seen the North Korean leaders through the three generations, do have emphasis on providing economic benefits to the people, although they really can't improve their livelihoods too greatly. But, Kim Jong-un, like his predecessors, has also emphasized factories being produced or being built, and agricultural initiatives, et cetera. So even though most of us focus on the security aspects of North Korea and the military threat and missiles and nuclear weapons, the leadership has always had a parallel emphasis on the economics. And in major speeches by Kim Jong-un, like his father and grandfather, there's a lot of emphasis on economy and livelihood for the people. So, and a lot of the on-the-spot guidance visits by the leaders to the citizenry has been based on economics. But certainly we're concerned about whatever Pyongyang is getting from Moscow, because even if it's just economic benefits, that's undermining the impact of international sanctions. And certainly there's a concern of any kind of military technology being provided to North Korea.
All right. And amid such deepening ties between Russia and North Korea, Dr. Go, the South Korean foreign minister expressed concerns that if North Korea receives anything in return from Russia, it could threaten security on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. Now, what could Pyongyang receive from Moscow that we should be worried the most?
Well, there are many items that the Russians can supply North Korea with that could be a source of big concern. We can start with the prototypes of ballistic missiles that the Russians are probably developing or have deployed already. And North Koreans could use that as a basis to further develop their own ballistic missiles program. I think, as I mentioned before, that the Russian cargo ships visit to the submarine base in Dunai, the Russian Far East, and which later on went to North Korea, unloading a number of containers. Clear indication that Russians have supplied North Korea with some sort of weapon systems. So this will involve actual physical transfer of items. On the other hand, Russians could also supply North Korea with intangible know-hows, how to perfect their missile technology or even nuclear technology. And I think this is very telling that North Koreans have been able to successfully launch their space vehicle, the UNA space vehicle, last year after 2 previous instances of failures. And there were reports that the Russians reviewed the flight test data from the previous failures and gave advice to North Koreans to how to perfect the third times the launch, and they succeeded. So I think it's another indication that Russians are supplying North Korea with technological know-how, maybe even technology itself. But I think what North Koreans also want from Russia, and that there are no indications that this has taken place already, is probably sophisticated composite materials. North Koreans have been testing their intercontinental ballistic missiles for a couple of years by now, but then they haven't shown that they have acquired successful re-entry vehicle technology. And the reason is because, they can still test the re-entry vehicle with existing materials, but if they want to achieve high level of sophistication, they would need access to composite materials that, for instance, that uses special alloys or like carbon fibers. And these are materials that Russians can produce, and then not many other countries, in fact. And I think North Koreans want those materials from Russia, but the problem is, if North Koreans can have access to such highly sophisticated, complex materials, that really allow North Koreans to leapfrog their WMD and missile technology by a couple of generations, in fact. That will make North Korea's ballistic missile threat much more credible. And I think even Russians might think this is going too far at the moment. But then if the war in Ukraine goes on and Russians are feeling more stress and under pressure to change the course of the war, and they need to lean on North Koreans even more, then it's entirely feasible that Russians might end up supplying those materials and technology to North Korea.
So if the Ukraine war ends soon, there's not much of a possibility that Russia would give these composite materials that you have mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Now, Mr. Klingner, as far as I know, both the EU and the US imposed sanctions on Russia, and the European Union even included North Korea's defense minister, Kang Sun-nam, and the regime's missile bureau. Can these measures be effective, though?
Well, they won't be effective if we measure it in terms of preventing any further interaction between Russia and North Korea economically or militarily. But with sanctions, it's always important to enforce international law, UN resolutions, and punish those that violate them. Oftentimes, the weak link has been a reluctance by the international community to go after Chinese banks and businesses that have been facilitating North Korean violations or now Russian violations. So we've seen, even though Russia has had a lot of sanctions imposed against it after its invasion of Ukraine, it increased its trade with China, and that's provided really an economic lifeline that has offset the impact of international sanctions. And so we've seen increases in Chinese imports, not only of Russian energy, but also agricultural products. And then in return, China has increased its exports of technology and other goods to Russia. We can't really prevent the shipments of North Korean ammunition to Russia because they share a rail line, a land bridge in a way. And also, we don't have authority under existing UN resolutions to intercept ships on the high seas, and also both North Korea and Russia share contiguous territorial water. So, but it is important to maintain the sanctions, to go after those that are violating international laws and UN resolutions.
All right, I see your point, Mr. Klingner. Now, shifting gears to trilateral cooperation, Dr. Go, top diplomats from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan held trilateral meeting on the margins of the G20 foreign ministers meeting. And there they highlighted the importance of three-way cooperation. What kind of main agendas were discussed?
Well, there's always a reason why the three countries come together for these kind of meetings, is to present a unified stance on global challenges, and in particular the regional challenges of North Korea and China. So I think they didn't really stray away from those points. But I think this time around, this three-way meeting and then the presenting the unified stance that they have done many times before has a special significance, especially in the backdrop of the tentative gestures from North Korea to drive a wedge between Korea and Japan by offering Japan possibility of negotiating over the abductee issues. I think there are some concerns. I mean, it's only speculation. We don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. That the Japanese government is very much interested in reaching out to North Korea, even visiting Pyongyang for a summit between Kim Jong-un and Prime Minister Kishida. And if such an event took place, then that really would give a perception that Japan is not really aligned with Seoul and Washington when it comes to applying consistent pressure on North Korea, and that Japan is putting priority on their own domestic political agenda. And I think one of the major items that they discussed this time is probably getting assurance from the Japanese that that's not going to happen, that the Japanese are not going to surprise its allies and partners anytime soon. And it's very important to have a common front presented, not just to North Korea, but also to China. So I think we'll see what's going to will be the reaction from the North Koreans from now on. But if the North Koreans express disappointment or raises their level of criticism of the Japanese government, then we'll know that this the initial thrust by the North Korean regime to drive a wedge between Seoul and Tokyo has failed. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Right. Well, as our Dr. Go already mentioned, Mr. Klingner, after Cuba normalized ties with South Korea, North Korea suggested Kishida to pay a visit to Pyongyang, though some conditions were attached. Now, given that Kishida is in need of something big to help his approval rating, is a significant improvement in bilateral relations between Pyongyang and Tokyo possible, in your opinion?
We've seen since at least last May public statements by Prime Minister Kishida of an interest or a desire for senior level meetings between Japan and North Korea. And he and other senior Japanese officials have reiterated that intent several times since then. Now, Japan would clearly like to focus on resolving or making progress on the abductee issue. But Kim Jong-un's sister, recently came out with a statement saying that they're willing to have discussions with Japan, but the abductee issue would have to be off the table. So then Japan would have to decide whether to abandon what would be its main objective for talks in interest of just resuming dialogue to try to reduce tensions. But Kishida, I think, would like to make progress, but I think he'd be smart enough to realize that the Japanese public, like the South Korean public, is pretty skeptical of North Korean intentions now. There's not the optimism that there can be breakthroughs in negotiations or relations with Pyongyang. So, and also when then Prime Minister Koizumi back in 2002 had a trip to Pyongyang, thinking he had resolved the abductee issue, he actually faced a lot of criticism from the Japanese public because of North Korea's admission that they had kidnapped Japanese citizens. So I think it's good to have any of the three countries, the U.S., South Korea, Japan, try to engage with North Korea, try to have some kind of talks just to stimulate conversations on security issues. But I think there's not a lot of optimism that even if there are Japanese-North Korean talks, that it's going to lead to any kind of breakthrough.
All right, I see. Now, before I wrap up this show, I'd like to ask this very interesting question to our Dr. Go. Now, according to the Daily Mail, Kim Jong-un has a secret son who is kept out of the public eye because he's too pale and thin. Now, how did you see the report? And if this is true, does that mean that we cannot be sure that Kim Jong-un is the heir apparent?
Well, I found the report very amusing. First of all, I mean, I saw some contradiction in the report, because if Kim Jong-un really indeed has a secret son, we would know about it. But since we know about it, it's no longer a secret. So, but having said that, I think there's always been speculation, or even like some indication that Kim Jong-un and Lee Seol-ju do have at least two more children besides Kim Joo-ae, which has been presented to the public, and that one probably is a son. At least one is a son, and I think it's likely that they have a son, because that's been the consistent report by the South Korean government before Kim Joo-ae was presented to the public, and then there's all this rampant speculation that she could be the anointed successor to Kim Jong-un, even though she's only 10 years old at the moment. But I think it's possible that Kim Jong-un might consider replacing, or like actually finally revealing the true heir to the throne down the road. Because I think given the nature of the North Korean regime, the regime really puts priority and premium on the military history, military capability, and Kim Joo-ae, by definition, because there's no easy pathway for a woman in North Korea to have develop close relationship with the North Korean military. Kim Joo-ae would have to surmount those obstacles in order to be the successor to Kim Jong-un, whereas a son would have less difficulty with that. So they, having a son as a successor makes the succession process much less costly and less frictionless in many ways. So if the only reason why the son is not being revealed because she's too thin and pale, and that's bound to change given the genetics of the Kim family, then I think it's only a matter of time. The son will be revealed to the public and then made a true successor to Kim Jong-un.
All right, very interesting. We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'd like to ask many more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Dr. Go and Mr. Klingner, for your time and insights today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.